Welcome back to episode 7 of SC Academy for season 2025. I have to start by making an apology for no episode last week. Unfortunately, life got in the way, but we are back after a 1-week hiatus. I've decided to make a bit of a format change for this week's episode. Rather than going through each result from the previous week and previewing this week's games, I've decided to go through some relevant Supercoach topics that are worth discussion. I just feel like it's probably more beneficial to you guys. I mean, we all know the Supercoach results. If you're Supercoach players by now in round 7, you know, we're all locked into our teams. We all know the results. We all know how everyone scored. I more want to revolve around how do we make our teams better, and have some discussions around some players that are worth trading in, out, so on and so forth. So for full disclosure though, let's have a look at my dreadful result from round 5 that we missed seeing last week. Came away with a 10.79. It was a pretty horror week after a horror week beforehand, which we saw. But of course, I had Nicholson, Purdue, and Iongi all on the pine for their 91, 88, and 107 respectively. But not to dwell on it. Not for too long anyway. Let's have a quick look at last week's result. Came away with a 12.29. Much better week last week. I could have been better had I again not left Purdue on the pine for his 121. Also had Egan on the pine for his 99. Meanwhile, I played Iongi for his 25. Did captain Pappy though, and after 2 weeks of back-to-back red arrows after being in the top 2%, we finally had a week of green arrows bringing us back up to the top 8%. Ideally, it's not where we want to be. It's pretty disappointing after the early start that we had, but it's good to finally see some green arrows headed in our direction. Let's have a look at these discussion topics. So, big one, what to do with KP. He's now 667k. He's lost 122k already with a 137 BE. He's got a tough Sharks matchup this week. Last week he dropped 99.8k alone. His last 3 games he's scored 45 against the Titans, 35 against the Dogs, and then 34 against the Tigers. My big thing is that all these outs for the Knights have to be considered in this. You know, in these periods they've had like 3 different halfbacks in 3 weeks. They've had no Dylan Lucas. They had no Kai Pearce-Paul for a couple of weeks there. They've been a really injury and suspension prone team, and they've had to battle with a lot of positional changes there, and I really think that's affected KP's output. We need to remember he did start the season with an 82 against the Tigers and then a 129 against the Dolphins. He comes into a draw of Sharks, Warriors, Souths, Titans, and Eels. Now, I can understand the trade if you're trading from KP to Pappy. I can understand it. Maybe if you're a Gutho owner, or I guess a Walsh owner. It really depends on who your other cattle is. If you are already a Pappy owner though, and I'm personally going to be holding KP. I'm scared to not own him. He can go absolutely huge on his day. And with that draw coming up, I can just see him bouncing back. You know, the likes of Dylan Lucas are due to come back quite soon. I think he's due for a bounce back, and I could see it happening in the next couple of weeks. For me, even with that 137 BE, he's a hold, but as I always bang on about, you don't lose the money unless you make the trade. So, yeah, he's lost 122k. Yeah, he's probably going to lose some more, but you don't lose that money if you don't make the trade. So, for me, KP is a hold. Dylan E-God, as I've called him. Wow. He played 80 minutes last week. He's now 310k after making 111k last week. If you didn't get on last week, then look, it's tough, but I still think you need to probably find a way to get him in. He has been named on the bench this week. And the positive sign, though, last week was that he rotated between the edge and the middle, so I can see him getting decent minutes again this week, even though that he's been named on the bench. Don't forget he was named on the bench last week and then was a late change to the starting lineup. We might see that again. Negative 55 break even still, and he scored 99 with a try last week. He was just in everything. Like, even at halftime, I can't remember exactly how many points he was on. I think it was like 60 or something like that. I was absolutely stoked. And then to see him play out in the next 40 minutes and score a try on top of that as well was just icing on the cake. The big thing for me here, and I can understand why a lot of people didn't jump on last week, is they had to battle the Kant versus Egan, trade. Who do you bring in? I'm absolutely in agreement that, especially for me, I couldn't justify bringing in both last week. I'm just very lucky that I jumped the gun early on Tom Cant, and that allowed me to make this Dylan Egan trade last week with a bit more confidence. So if you haven't got him in already, yeah, it's 111k more expensive than what it was last week, but that really could go even higher in the next coming weeks, especially with that minus 55 BE. So get him in. Hiroti or Hinoti? This is a tough one for me. He's 288k. He's yet to have a price rise. He's got a minus 61 BE. He's had scores of 77 against the Raiders and then 73 against Manly. He's projected to make 96k this week, and that's projected off of 57, which I think he beats. He's got a favourable matchup against the Knights this week. The big problem is, and the concern for me, is it's potentially only a 1 to 2 week play. Now, with me having already made 3 boosts, which we'll get into a bit later when I talk about the trades that I made last week, as well as the trades that I made this week. With me being somebody who's already made 3 boosts, I'm already starting to consider needing to save trades and forego cash, especially where we've got so much cash generation happening this year. But for me, I'm going to do it this week. If he remains in the side next week, if he remains in the side next week and the week after, potentially, he'd come up against the Tigers and the Eels. I think it's more likely that Iro comes back against the Eels. The big thing is, though, the reason that tipped me over the edge and the reason I decided to bring him in this week is if he's not in the side, it's not like he's going to be on the bench. He's probably going to be one injury away from being straight back in the team. He's probably going to have a stupidly low break even at that point. With the way that CTWs are going this year, I'm kind of happy to leave him there at my maybe 5th or 6th probably 6th CTW, and just when he plays to be there to make cash. So yeah, I've decided to jump on, but there are warning signs. I would say that if you're really conscious about trades, or you have some fires to put out, I would be pretty concerned about making this trade. But for me, what this trade allowed me to do, which we'll get onto later in the episode, was enough to make me commit to this move. So moving on, is the Broncos left edge honeymoon over? So this is diving into Shibasaki and HIATUS. So Shibasaki is now 520k. He's made 287k so far this season. He now has a BE of 75. I could consider holding him one more week, but effectively I feel like he's topped out in price. I can't really see him being much more expensive than this for the rest of the year. And the trade to Hiroti frees up 231k. For me, this trade is a little bit more of a no-brainer for me than the HIATUS trade. So HIATUS is cheaper. He's 493k. He's made 152k this season and lost 12k last week. He now has a BE of 48. Now, in last week's game, he scored a 44, but he only played 58 minutes and went off with a HIA. He's scored in all but one game this season, which was in the wet against the Dolphins, where Shibasaki turned up because the ball was going to the centre because it was torrential conditions. The ball wasn't finding HIATUS on the edge because he would just be driven into touch. So we can kind of wipe that game from HIATUS, HIATUS scores when we take into account whether or not he's a hold. He's got a favourable Warriors matchup this week. For me, he's way more of a hold than Shibasaki. I feel like HIATUS still maybe has one, maybe two more price rises, I should say, in him. But I also feel like he's probably, I don't want to say a safer play, because he relies on attacking stats and relies on tries, but he is scoring them. Like, we've just got to go with what we see. And I think he's worth holding 1 to 2 more weeks and reassessing. What to do with Iongi? So he's now 435k. He's made 202k this season. He turned up 2 weeks ago. He really should be a beneficiary of this Moses return. He has a BE of 2, so you've got to hold him this week if you've got him. He's definitely not a sell. I actually think he could be playable against the Tigers this week. As I mentioned, with the return of Moses, I expect his opportunities to open up a lot more. Not necessarily off the back of any work that Moses is doing, but allowing Dylan Brown to go into that second receiver role and have Iongi sweeping out the back effectively, I think he really could cash in on that. But it's do or die this week. You know, for me, he has to go back to what he did 2 weeks ago and come away with a big score. Otherwise, I'm going to be finding a way to get him out. He's already 435k, so he's close to topping out. That 25 from last week or whatever it was is going to be in his rolling average. So, yeah, for me, do or die on Iongi this week. Hold him. Maybe play him. I don't know. It's so hard to say. The Eels are so up and down, and he's up and down with them. Don't get me wrong, I think he's a fantastic football player, one of the shining lights in the Eels attack, but just needs those opportunities to score Supercoach points. So we'll see what happens this week against the Tigers. That game could be 40-0. It could be 30-all. Who knows what happens. Happy with Pappy. He's the number 1 fullback in Supercoach right now. I'm really glad that I didn't get baited into going into Gutho. I feel like if I did, I'd be stuck with him and then having to trade Ponga to Pappy this week, which I really wouldn't want to do because, as I mentioned, I feel like Ponga's a hold. Anyway, 136 last week. Still goal kicking with no Meaney. He could retain the goal kicking when Meaney returns as well. You know, he's got a better strike rate than Meaney. He's now got a BE of 18, and let's just face it, the Storm are the best team in the comp. I will get into another couple of slides about the Storm, so I won't keep banging on too much. We'll keep it short and sweet with Pappy, but yeah, another captaincy option again this week. For me, I'll be putting the C straight on him, and I got a little cheeky VC somewhere else in the game beforehand, but yeah, no intentions of looping. But yeah, I think that Pappy is the number 1 choice right now. As I said, okay, here's the Storm slide. How many's too many? They're on fire. They're scoring points for fun. I really expect consistency out of them, and it's been a really wild, inconsistent comp so far this year. You know, we've had the likes of the Panthers drop right off. We've had teams come out of nowhere and pick up wins that we weren't expecting. They've got a draw of Dolphins, Souths, Raiders, Tigers, Sharks. Like, come on. They're going to put on, 5 games? Mark my words, if they score less than 190 points in those 5 weeks, I'll be very, very, very surprised. I just think they're too dangerous, and they're too dangerous not to own a part of. The question is, how many is too many? I was leaning towards 3. I may or may not have broken that rule this week and ended up with 4. I think 4 is on the limit. 5, I feel like, is too many. I feel like 4 is a good amount. You just need to have quite a piece of them because they can go off in this any time in this next run of 5 games. But I'll allude to as to who of the 4 I have in my team when we get on to my trades for this week. Hines, Cleary, both or neither. Big talking point here. So Hines is now 690k. He lost 72k last week. He's got a BE of 127. He does actually have a favourable draw. He had scores of 60 against the Dogs, 48 against the Raiders, and 38 against Manly. For me, the problem with Hines is the Trindle factor. We just don't know which side of the park the Sharks are going to attack each week. We don't know how much ball Nico's going to end up with in his hands, and it's just really unpredictable. For me, I'm going to hold him, but if I was a non-owner, I wouldn't be going out and looking at buying him, especially with that 127 BE. You can afford to wait a couple of weeks and see if he bottoms out even further, and I'd still be reluctant to buy him. He's almost on the verge of being a sell, but for me, I'm just going to wait it out. I bought Hines and Cleary at the start of the year for a reason. Cleary, 640k. He lost 47k last week. He now has a BE of 45. The Panthers are so overdue for a win. It is not funny. And the difference between Hines and Cleary is that Cleary has his hands all over the ball. He is the entire attacking system of the Panthers. Now with a BE of 45, I actually think Nathan Cleary is a buy, let alone a hold. I think you need to buy Nathan Cleary this week if you do not own him. We touched on a couple of Storm players. Jerome Hughes is kind of battling / not battling an injury. He's been named this week. I would be more confident buying Nathan Cleary this week and hoping that he goes on a run than I would be buying Jerome Hughes. So, yeah, if you are an owner, hold. If you're a non-owner, buy. That's my 2 bits of advice. Jackson Purdue, the real deal. He is now 533k. I could not believe that when I saw it. He's now made 276k this season. He made 104k last week. He scored 121 against South. He now has a negative 45 BE at 533k. Absolutely mind-blowing to think what kind of price tag he could end up at in the next couple of weeks. But the problem is he's almost looking too good to trade. I really want to trade him when he tops out, but he's almost looking too good. He looks dangerous every single time he touches the ball, and if you remember back a few episodes ago, if you have been watching over the last few weeks, we banged on about how he was not a trade for Tamale. Tamale is now 428k. He's over 100k cheaper, and he has a 49 BE. So there's almost a 100-point swing just in BE alone, and he's 100k cheaper. This is why the eye test tells us everything we need to know. Forget what, for some games there are stats, points, whatever it may be, that are outliers than what we expect for the rest of the season. The outliers early for Jackson Purdue was the Cowboys were fucking terrible. The other outlier was that he had a sin bin. Those 2 things dropped his points a bit. But for the eye test for me, every time he touched the ball, he looked dangerous. This is why I stayed loyal to Jackson Purdue, and now look at him, 533k with a negative 45 break even. It just really, really happy that I stuck to my guns here and let Tamale go through to the keeper. Don't get me wrong, Tamale was still a good buy, but now you look at that, 49 BE for Tamale. I'm almost looking at jumping off. He's topped out for me. He's in the Shibasaki Arthur's mold, whereas Purdue is way more expensive with a negative break even. So my biggest piece of advice, if you see something on the field that ticks your fancy, ticks your boxes, whatever it may be, that makes you realise that, hey, this guy has got attack in him. He's going to score Supercoach points. Stick to your guns. Really trust your gut, because when it does pay off, it's super satisfying. When it doesn't pay off, it's whatever. But when you don't trust your gut and you don't do it and it would have paid off, that's when it really hurts in Supercoach. This is a game of guessing and gambling. Just trust your gut. You are not going to regret it. lowest break-evens. Hiroti, negative 61. Billy Smith, negative 57, but he won't play this week. He's definitely going to be somebody who we will talk about next week when he returns. Dylan Egan, negative 55. Jackson Purdue, negative 45. Falalo with a negative 39. He will not play this week. Sam Rani, negative 32. Also won't play. Jack Todd, surprising one. I mean, he's kind of fallen through, but he's got a negative 24 BE coming off the bench for the Dogs, 198k. Don't go there, but it's there. Grant Anderson, negative 22, and then Hammer with a negative 22. Also, highest break-evens. Turbo still with a 168, obviously won't be playing. Latrell Mitchell with a 148. Kalen Ponga with a 137. Charles Nickel Clockstad, who will not be playing, with a 131. Dylan Edwards, 130. Nico Hines, a 127. Payne Haas, a 117. Bradman Best, 117. Daniel Tupou, a 114. And then Apisai Coruscant with a 114 also. Now, this is just for full disclosure. These were our trades from last week. So our round 6 trades, we boosted again, our third boost of the season so far. Just on that, I wouldn't want to be making 4 boosts this early in the season, but I'm completely fine with making 3 boosts if you can do exactly what I've done here and bring in 2 guns that you feel like you're going to lock in for the rest of the year. I traded out both for Thermore, Kobe Hetherington and Adam Dewey, and brought in Eli Katoa, Dylan Egan and Cam Munster. Tick, tick, tick. Left me with 34 trades, 2 boosts and 23k in the bank. This week I've only made the 2 trades, but I'm really happy with what I've done here. Gotten rid of Shibasaki. As I said, I feel like he's topped out. I don't feel like he's going to be any more expensive for the rest of the year. I feel like this week is the week to trade him out if you are planning to do so. I have brought in Hiroti, and that money has allowed me to go off Corey Pakes onto Harry Grant. This was really the only trade I wanted to make, was the Corey Pakes to Harry Grant trade, and by making the Shibasaki to Hiroti trade, freed up that money. As soon as I saw that I was able to do that, Hiroti became a tick in my book. Do not get me wrong, I am a little bit worried about that trade. As I said, it's really only a 1 to 2 week play. I will be looking to cash in on Hiroti, or potentially, as I said, you can leave him there. You know, he's probably not going to be getting a bench role, for example. You know, he's not going to be an AE nightmare. If he's not in the team, it's probably best case scenario than being on the bench. So I've brought him in, leaves me with 32 trades, 2 boosts, and 44.5k. Finally, getting on to my round 7 team, and now we've got a much different team. At hooker, we have Harry Grant. I have Sandon Smith as my reserve. Front row forward, we've got Payne Haas, Terrell May, and then we've got Corey Horsburgh as our reserve, and Naf White. That's actually one we probably should have touched on as well. He's got a B now in the 70s, but I'm more prepared to hold somebody at front row forward than I am at centre wing. He's also a non-playing reserve. Second row, Tino's back in. Tom Can, I'm giving another crack. Eli Katoa, and then my non-playing reserves are Dylan Egan, Lachlan Hubner, and Matty Nicholson. I will say Dylan Egan plays the Thursday night game, so if we do see a late change and that he is due to start, we will probably find a way to bring him in. Probably for Sandon Smith, I would say. Yeah, I would say Sandon Smith would be the guy to go. Moving on to halfback, we've got Nathan Cleary and Nico Hines as my reserve. 5'8", Jaden Campbell and Cam Munster as my reserve. I forgot to put in my VC and C here, but my VC is on Ruben Garrick in the Thursday night game. Again, don't expect a loop, but I just needed to put a VC in there that plays before my captain. And then I am playing Hiroti, Marzu, Arthurs, and then my 3 non-playing reserves are Jenkins. I can finally say with confidence that Purdue's not going to score massive this week because he's on the bye, so I'm glad that he's a non-playing reserve. And Rob Toya, who is another one we'll probably touch on next week. He will be a pretty popular trade for a Billy Smith, I would say. He's also a non-playing reserve. Then my fullback is none other than Pappy. I have chucked the captaincy on him. I expect him to go huge again. Non-playing reserve, Iongi, as I said, I really did consider playing him over Sandon Smith. I just don't want to risk it again. It feels like every time I don't play him, well, no, I shouldn't say every time. I didn't play him for his ton, and then I go and play him for a 25. It's been the theme of my season this year. I just can't get my sit v starts right. Hopefully that this week is not another case of that. But yeah, and then we have Ponga in the flex. As I said, we have decided to hold him. We'll see how he goes, give him a few more weeks, wait till all these returns come back and reassess then. I really do think he could go on a stretch of games where we'll be making the conversation again about trading him back in. So, yeah, for me, he is a hold. All right, that's all for this week. I hope you enjoyed the new format. I was, kind of sick of just having the same systematic format every week. I feel like, although you're not talking back to me, it's a bit more of an open discussion. I feel like it gives you a little bit more insight into my brain, and also helps you make your team better, and gives you some of my opinions on the more pressing matters and more relevant matters in Supercoach, rather than just going through scores and whatnot and previewing games. So I really would appreciate your feedback in the comments below. Let me know if you enjoyed the revised format this week. And we'll keep it up next week, and we'll see you all then. Cheers.